Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Shabbos Daf Kuf Chof Tes is a lengthy daf which is devoted almost entirely to concepts of medical treatment. It begins with a discussion of when one is allowed to violate Shabbos in order to take care of a woman who is giving birth or has just given birth. Then it goes into some general rules of medical care for Shabbos, and then it talks about bloodletting, specifically bloodletting on Shabbos, and in general what is healthy to do before or after the period of bloodletting. So the Gemara begins by saying, when is a woman who is giving birth or has just given birth, when is she considered to be in a situation of sakana, a danger to her life that you should violate Shabbos for her? So here we have a machlokes between Rav Ashi and Mar Zutra. Now, when the womb is open, everybody agrees that she's certainly in a situation of sakana, and you're allowed to be mechal Shabbos, whether she says she needs it or she doesn't say she needs it. If others who are around her say that she needs a certain treatment which involves violating Shabbos, even if she says she doesn't need it, you don't listen to her. She's in a dangerous situation, and you violate Shabbos over her protests. If, however, the womb is closed, so according to Mar Zutra, it depends if she says she needs or not. If she says she needs, then you trust her and you violate the Shabbos. According to Rav Ashi, you don't trust her. Even if she says she needs, she's not in a situation of sakana, and you don't violate Shabbos for her. The Gemara says that the halach on this is like Mar Zutra. We go leniently in any situation which involves potential concern for loss of life. Now, how do you define when the womb is open, and how are we supposed to know that? So the Gemara defines when it opens and when it closes. So the Gemara gives three benchmarks to determine when the womb actually opens. The Gemara says either when she sits on the birthing couch to actually begin labor, to actually begin not labor but to push out the child, or it's when the blood is flowing freely, or the third version is when she cannot walk because of the position of the baby, not because of the labor pains, but because of the position that the baby is in. She can't walk on her own without being supported by her friends. Now, how long does it stay open for? So Abaye says for 3 days after the birth. Rava says, in the name of Rav Yehuda, for 7 days after the birth, and some say 30 days after the birth. The Gemara determines that these are three different stages of halacha. For the first 3 days after the birth, whether she says she needs Chol Shabbos or not, or Mechal Shabbos for anything that she may need. Up until 7 days, we're only Mechal Shabbos for her if she says she needs it, and until 30 days, we're not Mechal Shabbos for her. She's not considered to be in a situation of sakana, of danger, but she is considered to be sick, and therefore we have a goy do anything that she needs, just like the halacha is, like we've seen her. Ula Beit Rav Eloi says that anybody who's sick, even if it's not a sickness which involves any danger to life, a goy is allowed to do any malachos for her. Okay, moving on to the subject of 30 days after a birth. The Gemara says that a woman should not go to the mikvah or any other tevila into water for the first 30 days after the birth, because the chill can be dangerous to her, and that's only if her husband is not around, because her husband would warm her with his closeness, and she don't have to worry about that. Why would she go to the mikvah if he's not there? In order to be able to eat taharos, truma, and food like that. Where it actually says it once happened that Rav Chizda's daughter, who was married to Rava, went to the mikvah when Rava was not around, and she became chilled and sick, and they carried her on her sickbed all the way to Pampadisa, where Rava was, in order that he should be able to warm her. Okay, now Rabbi Yehuda says, in the name of Shmuel, you're allowed to make a fire for a woman who has just given birth on Shabbos. And one version of it seems to be that it's only, he says, only in the winter. So the Gemara says that they thought that what he meant was that only during the winter you're allowed to do this, and only for a woman who's just given birth, but not for a regular sick person. And it's not true. You're allowed to make a fire for someone who's not feeling well, whether they are sick, whether they have just given birth, whether it's during the winter, whether it's during the summer, whatever it is. Now the Gemara goes into halachas of bloodletting and the proper treatment for that. So after one lets blood, he needs to drink and he needs to eat. He also has a severe vulnerability to chills and wind. So the Gemara says somebody who bloodletted and became cold, so you make a fire for him even in the middle of the summer. The Gemara says that Shmuel, after he let blood, was cold, and they chopped up a very expensive chair made of shaga wood and threw it in the fire. For Rav Yehuda, they threw yoina wood in the fire. For Rabbah, they threw a stool in the fire in order that he should be able to have heat. Abaye asked, this is Baltashchis? So they answered him, it's more Baltashchis, it's more wasteful to destroy the body than it is to destroy your chair, and therefore this is a valuable use of the chair. On that subject, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Rav, you should sell your house in order to be able to buy shoes. It's more important to have shoes than it is to have a house, and it's more important to sell your shoes in order to buy food to eat after bloodletting, because it's very important. And what do you need to eat? So there's a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. Rav says you have to eat meat because meat has life force in it, and that life force will replace your missing life force. And Shmuel says you have to drink wine. You need something red, which will replace the redness that you lost in the blood. Okay, now the Gemara lists a number of things that people used to do after they let blood. The Gemara gives a mnemonic, the word shenimsar, which stands for the chachamim involved here. Shenimsar is Shmuel, Yochanan, Rav Nachman, Rav Yosef, and Rava. What happened over here? So the Gemara says that Shmuel, after he let blood, he always made sure to eat cooked spleen. Rav Yochanan made sure to drink wine until the smell of wine came out of his ears. Rav Nachman drank wine until his spleen floated in wine. Rav Yosef drank wine until the smell of wine came out of the hole that the bloodletter made in his veins. And Rava drank wine from a 3-leaf tree. That either means that the vine was 3 years old, or that the wine was 3 years old. Machlokes there. And Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said to his Talmidim, do me a favor, on the day that you let blood, tell your wives that Rav Nachman is coming to visit, because then they'll cook up a big meal, which is what you need. Now that's a bit not truthful, so the Gemara says that you are allowed to be not truthful only in one circumstance, and that's for one's health. Normally you have to tell the truth, but let's say, for example, somebody who lets blood and he doesn't have any wine to drink and you need to, so he could do the following thing. He could take a coin, which is likely to not be accepted because it's worn out. Usually, no matter how poor you are, you can get hold of one of those, and you can go to 7 wine shops and ask to taste the wine and then to pay for it with the coin. If they refuse it, that's their own problem, even though you know they're likely to refuse it, but it's not your problem because, again, you're allowed to play this trick only because of health. And you can do this in 7 stores, and then you've sipped from 7 barrels of wine, and you've drunk enough wine to be able to restore your health at least a little bit. Now, if you don't have any coin, at least to even be able to do that, so eat 7 black dates and rub oil on your head and sleep in the sun. The Gemara says, Avlet found Shmuel sleeping in the sun. He said, oh, you're a wise man of the Jews. What are you doing sleeping in the sun? That's not healthy. So Shmuel said, oh, it's a day of bloodletting, and therefore I needed to sleep in the sun for my health. The Gemara interestingly notes it was not the case. Shmuel had not done bloodletting that day, but there is one day of the year that it's always helpful to sleep in the sun, and that's the day of the summer solstice, which is usually about June 20th. And Shmuel didn't want to share that with Avlet. He was an astrologer who was not a Jew, and I guess he didn't feel the need to share that with him. Okay, on the subject of bloodletting and wind, so we have another mnemonic here. Heikel beruach tam shaha. 4 things. He's leaning with the wind. It tastes weighted. What does this teach us? So Shmuel says as follows. So the Gemara says as follows. Rav and Shmuel say that somebody who does not eat right after bloodletting is being careless with his life, and in Shemayim they'll be careless with his food. They won't provide him with his food because if he doesn't take care of his life, what do we need to feed him for? Rav and Shmuel also said somebody who undergoes bloodletting should not sit somewhere where there's a lot of wind, because if the bloodletter took out too much blood, the wind might take out a little bit more blood, and then that'll put him in a life-threatening situation. Shmuel, after he let blood, when he let blood, he did it in a house made of walls that were 7.5 bricks thick. Each brick is 3 tvachim wide for a total of 22.5 tvachim, almost 4 amas, approximately 6 to 8 feet thick. And one day when he did bloodletting in that house, he felt weak, so he looked at the walls and he saw that it was missing half a brick in one spot. Okay. Rav and Shmuel then say further, somebody who does bloodletting should make sure to eat something first before he leaves the house. And if he does not, then if he sees a dead body, his face will turn green. If he sees a murderer, he's going to die. And if he meets a pig, he's going to get saras, a terrible leprosy-like skin disease. Rav and Shmuel also say, last teaching, that there are 5 things that you should not stand up immediately after doing. If you were to stand up immediately afterwards, these 5 things would cause you to be closer to death than to life. Those 5 things are eating, drinking, sleeping, bloodletting, and marital relations. Okay, now how often should one let blood? So for the first 40 years of his life, it should be once in 30 days. For the next 20 years, it should be twice. It should be once in every 2 months, and then after age 60, it should be once in every 3 months. What is the best day to bloodlet? So the Gemara says either a Sunday, Wednesday, or Friday, not any other days. Why not? Monday, Thursday, you shouldn't, because the heavenly court sits in judgment at the same time that the Beis Din sits in judgment down here on earth, and therefore they're going to examine your mitzvahs, and it's not a good day to do a dangerous activity. On Tuesday, you shouldn't, because on Tuesday, Mars is exerting its influence over the world during the even hours. Now we know anything which is even is inauspicious, and Mars is a force which is associated with trouble and misfortune, so you do not want to combine the two. And Mars is in the 8th hour of Tuesday. Mars is in ascension. Now there's a cycle. There are 7 heavenly stars. There's the 5 visible planets plus the sun and the moon, and they cycle each hour. A different one is in control of the hashpa, the flow which comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to us, and it exerts an influence over it, and it cycles through the hour, and it begins again anew every week. The number of hours in the week is divisible by 7. So a person should therefore be careful not to do anything like bloodletting on a day when Mars is in control of the even hour of the week during the daylight hours. Even if you won't do it during the 8th hour, we're afraid you may accidentally end up during the 8th hour, and therefore you should avoid it. And then what about Friday? Friday, Mars is also in control during an even hour. The Gemara says Friday, you're right, should have been a problem, but everybody seems to do it on Friday and nothing's happening to them, so therefore we say Shem Reb Sam Hashem. Hashem is obviously protecting the many and protecting the foolish. Now people like to bloodlet on Friday because you're supposed to eat fish after bloodletting, and they can only afford fish l'kavod Shabbos. Now there are additional rules about when you should do bloodletting, when you should not. Shmuel says you should not bloodlet on the 4th day of the week, meaning Wednesday, which falls out on the 4th day of the month, the 14th day of the month, or the 24th day of the month, or within the last 4 days of the month. Also, you should not let blood on Rosh Chodesh, or the 2nd day of the month, because it causes weakness. 3rd day of the month is dangerous. Erev Yontif causes weakness. Erev Shavuos is dangerous. Therefore, don't do it on any Erev Yontif, lest you get confused and do it on Erev Shavuos. What's so dangerous about Erev Shavuos? On the day before Shavuos, there was a wind called Tavayach, the slaughterer, which blew through the world in order to slaughter the Jews, had they not agreed to accept the Torah, and it blows again every year, and therefore you should avoid bloodletting on the day that wind is blowing. Now, Shmuel says if somebody eats wheat-based products and then lets blood, all he's doing is letting out the influence of the wheat. He's not actually doing anything else. But it does help to lighten. If you had too much blood in the body, it helps to lighten, and he doesn't have that. Now, someone who lets blood should drink immediately, and he shouldn't eat until a half mil time. The time it takes to walk half a mil has gone by. The Gemara is not sure if this means that drinking later or eating earlier would not help, or if it would actually be problematic. The Gemara leaves that as teku. The Gemara is not sure which one it is. Okay, other medical advice. Rav says if somebody wants to sell you gourds like squash for 100 zuz, 100 for a zuz, then it's worth it to buy them. Otherwise, don't bother because there's no health value. Animal heads, 100 for a zuz, you could buy them. Otherwise, don't bother. Animal lips, even 100 for a zuz, don't bother to buy them. It's not worth anything. And Rav Yosef says when we were in Rav Huna's yeshiva, there was a day which was like a vacation for the Chachamim. Either they weren't feeling well or it was a vacation, and people say this is a lip day. I didn't know what that meant. Now I know lips are useless, and this day apparently was also useless. Okay, now we go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah had told us that there's a machlokes whether or not you're allowed to tie, whether or not you're allowed to cut the umbilical cord on Shabbos. You're definitely allowed to tie it. So Gemara says another thing that you could do for a child that is just born is you could wrap the placenta. It's important to wrap the placenta in something to keep the newborn warm and keep it healthy. What do you wrap it in? So if you're a royalty, you wrap it in oil. You soak it in a bowl of oil. If you're just rich, then you put it in combed wool. And if you're poor, then you wrap it in rags. Now, the halacha Gemara says, like of Yossi, you are allowed to cut the cord on Shabbos, and even the Chachamim don't argue in a case of twins. Twins will pull away from each other. If you don't cut the cord, they will cause a danger to each other. Okay, now the Gemara says, what are you allowed to do for a newborn on Shabbos? The Gemara says, if you look in the Navi Yecheskel, he has a nevuah where he describes HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaking about as if he found the Klal Yisrael as a newborn girl lying on the ground with nobody caring for it, and he raised it and he took care of her, and then she went and looked for other men when she grew up. So all the things that is described there that was not being performed for this newborn child, those are the things you're allowed to do on Shabbos. Those are the things that are needed. And what does it say? It says V'yom huledas Isach, on the day that you were born. So you see it, you are allowed to help a woman birth on Shabbos. Like Karach here, your milk cord was not cut. There you see you're allowed to cut the cord. V'mayam leruchatz l'mishi, your skin wasn't washed to be smooth. There you see you're allowed to wash the skin to be smooth. Hum leach loy hum lach, you weren't powdered. You see you're allowed to put on powder. Hachta loy hochtalt loy chutalt, you weren't swaddled, to wrap the infant tightly to straighten it out, and then you're allowed to do all of those on Shabbos. And these are the halachas that I do on Shabbos, and this takes us to the end of the chapter called Mefanin, the 18th parak of Masechah Shabbos, and we shall begin the 19th.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.